If you can see me, I can't tell.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm Christine Taylor Butler, and if you've gone to cons with me before, you know I'm a recovering civil engineer from MIT. I always tell people that I'm in a mixed marriage. I'm a Star Trek girl, and I'm married to a Star Wars boy. Star Trek has more science in it, so let's just talk about that. Okay. So I'm primarily known as a children's writer because I've been really disheartened by what was happening to my kids in school and what was happening to me. And I got conned into writing a lot of nonfiction for kids, but my heart's really in science fiction. And I had a hard time convincing children's publishers that if you're not Octavia Butler, science fiction can still be a thing, in middle grade and YA. And that kids could read a slightly more sophisticated story. So I had this idea buzzing around in my head about this kid who has this desperate need to go on an adventure. And he has the disadvantage of the only person who can take him is his father. And the answer is when your grades are better. When you're a C student, that's the same as no. And then he's got this, badass uncle who just goes on all these amazing adventures, and the guy doesn't like him. And so he's pretty much marooned in this suburb. And one day his uncle shows up and says, I have this one last expedition, and you can earn a spot on it if you solve all of these puzzles in 7 days. And that starts off the book and the adventure. And so I think if we go to slide 2.
Okay.
Slide 2. Okay. Now you have to understand, this is a lazy, trash-talking, wannabe basketball player who mysteriously a month before could not even hit the side of the garage with a basketball and is suddenly playing phenomenal, and he doesn't know why, and he doesn't care. He's really good. He's made the team. His uncle shows up and gives him this puzzle, and it's hieroglyphics. And he can't even get into the game without solving it. And of course, you see his first solution at the bottom of the page, and it's wrong because the R's are not the same symbol. So he gives it to a friend across the street who's really smart, and she gets it in 5 minutes and won't tell him what the answer is. And the game is really hard by design because the uncle really wants every kid on the block playing this game. And so I'm a puzzle person, and I have to tell you, if I had known that the FBI or the CIA had people who spend their entire day breaking codes, you would not see me on this panel. I would be working for the military or for the government. I mean, I didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, so I always went down to the drugstore.
On that note, they've actually started going to conventions to promote that idea of that they want people that want to be code breakers and puzzle breakers and stuff to sign up. That's what they want. That's their recruitment.
Well, and when I go to school visits, I show the pages from the CIA and the FBI. And I said, look, here's a kid page, here's a teacher page. And I said, I don't have to make this stuff up. There are actually experts out there who come up with these things. And because I'm planting seeds, but I also know a lot of adults who have what I called deferred dreams. Does that make sense? I wanted to be a writer, and everybody said, yeah, nobody writes, and that's not a real job. And why don't you just become an engineer? You're really good at math. And voila, I ended up at MIT. And MIT said, you're not doing really well here. You don't seem happy. And well, I was also an artist, and I took classes at the Cleveland Museum of Art. And so I switched into art. And then my sister, who was also an MIT student, said, how does one pay off one's school loans with an art degree from MIT? And I was like, yeah. So I went back and got both. And MIT is very flexible that way. I had 2 advisors. So I did engineering and art at the same time. But I started watching all of these people who would show up for their MIT interviews and not want to admit they read for pleasure. And that was really hard, and then they didn't like math and science. And now, meantime, I have written about 70 nonfiction books for children for major publishers.
Wow.
And I had a really nerdy editor who quit her job at Scholastic and started Move Books. And she said, don't you have a science fiction book where you kind of throw in a lot of math and science in? And I was like, yeah, but I don't think it's your thing. And and she has what I call the mom voice, where she says, give me the book. And you're like, okay, yeah, sure. Here it is. So she was reading it, and she got it in a way that other publishers did not. I'm not going to leave anybody hanging. They are going to be solving these puzzles along with the kids. And if you have not read the first book, the spoiler is on the second page. They see this other code and they don't know what it is. And I figured adults will look at the numbers and start to realize these are GPS locations. But the kids don't know what they are. Mm-hmm. And so they're going through all these machinations. And so they then have to enlist more kids on the block. And one of them is the character's arch nemesis, but she's a coder and she's a genius. And she realizes, oh, it's a pigpen code, and sets out to show them how to do it. So that's been really attractive to readers, as they were like, I don't have to know this, because as I'm confused, I'm working through the puzzles with the characters. Mm-hmm. The other thing I did is on the next slide, which is you'll see at the top. Go to the next one.
Mm-hmm. We're there.
Okay. My feet is slow. The very first picture is the British Museum, because I had this idea. What do kids do in teens do in science fiction? They hack things and they don't think like normal adults. And in fact, there's a PhD librarian who was reading the first book, and he says, I'm reading this book and thinking, come on, think this through. And then he says, well, how did I make decisions as a 13-year-old? And he says, wait, she nailed it. I mean, so think of this as a book about kids who are the worst detectives ever. But one of the things I wanted to figure out was, what would it take to break into the British Museum? So I went to the British Museum. Obviously, no, you can't break into the British Museum. But I'm fascinated by that building because it's neoclassical buildings with a skylight connecting them.
I've actually been there. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's just wonderful to walk through. And then that second is the Rosetta Stone, because there is a scene in my book where Ben overhears his father, who he thinks is a jewel thief, looking at the Rosetta Stone and getting really angry about it. And it's because a European person has carved things in to this stone, and they consider this thing sacred. Mm-hmm. So I said, all right, my family's really heavy consumers of Harry Potter and Philip Pullman's Golden Compass, and why can't I use real world mysteries in my book? So they go to Easter Island and they go to the Dogon Island and they see El Candelabro, which is off the coast of Peru, which is that thing that looks like a candle holder. And then that staircase is actually in the Vatican Museum, where I have been. And it's a spiral staircase, and at the top is post office, where you can kind of mail something to yourself or mail it home. But I was really fascinated by that. So I said, why don't I just use real things and real mysteries? And at the time that I wrote about the Easter Island heads, I did not realize there was an expedition that found out some of them have bodies underneath. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how Tribes was shaping up. I'm a heavy consumer, still am in our household of science fiction. And I thought, how do I take people on an adventure? I mean, even adults in the Kansas City area don't go far. I was fascinated at the number of people who come from Iowa and Nebraska to see us turn on the Christmas lights a couple of miles away. And so I said, how do I show people a part of the world that they don't get to see? And there are mysteries. Like I'm dealing with the Terracotta Army in the third book, and no one has been in there because the mercury content in the soil is 4,000 times the toxic level. So I can use the legends on what is inside that tomb, because you know what? Who's to prove me wrong? So, yeah. So what are your questions?
The comment's been pretty active. And not only that, multiple people have access to the official ConFromHome account, so we just set a bunch of policies that made it official. That I think Lord of the Rings is better than Harry Potter is an official position. So I guess, and Deep Space Nine is the best Trek is an official position, and then there's been some pushback. So I've got to sift through that for comments and questions.
It's okay. My husband is right there with you that Deep Space Nine is the best Trek. Really.
It's right when they shifted from individual episodic stories to an overarching theme.
Yeah.
And but they kept the same writers that made it good.
Well, and there, one of the things that it did, we talked earlier on the diversity panel, one of the things it did was it had a single dad who had a warm relationship with his son. Mm-hmm. And it was such a great character arc, and they've been streaming it nonstop on cable here. So you see this progression of this young actor from when he's a little kid to when he's an adult working as a journalist, and that affection thread that just keeps going, and yet he's allowed to still be this normal, break the rules kind of kid. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Avery Brooks is a big deal in our household.
Okay, so breaking into a museum reminds me of the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil and E. Frankweiler.
Yeah, I actually don't have them break in. Well, I have not had them break in yet. I'm really giving a lot of consideration to that, or whether it's something else like Fort Knox in the fourth book. But he does go there. For those of you who read the book, he does go there in the middle of the night when it's closed, because he has all of these clues. And for those of you, sorry, this is a spoiler, when they finally unlock the game, it takes them places all over the world, and they think it's a hologram, but it is actually taking them to the real place. So he ends up in the British Museum looking for a clue in the middle of the night, and it is the wrong place. So he's met by a night guard, that shouldn't be there, who gives him a clue where to go, then disappears. And he runs into that night guard again towards the end of the book and figures out who he really is. But yeah, I have to tell you, before there was a lot of security, my very best friend, I won't say who she is because she's a medical professional, and I want to keep her name safe.
Also, especially during these times.
Oh yeah. Well, this is back when we were in college. So, back when the Flintstones were real people. We were incensed that when we went to see a session of Congress, when Congress was over, you were supposed to leave. And they said, well, I said, we own this building, we're taxpayers, and why should we leave? So we were able to stay in the building for a while, dodging security guards and ducking in the bathrooms. And so, all right, that's me. Statute of limitations is over. So there you go. Yeah.
We've got a question and a comment. I'll read the comment first, which was on Star Trek. Give me Monster of the Week or give me Death. They've really continued to give opinions and official opinions here.
I love it. I do love it. I said on the Library Journal live feed that Star Trek was science fiction and Star Wars was fantasy,
it's
and
true.
A bunch of librarians said, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantasy in space. Do your children read your books?
Yeah, and they're really harsh critics. Really, really, really harsh critics. But they made me a better writer. And actually, they were about the target age when I was writing this series, when I started. But they read a lot. And one is now working at Disney. She wanted to go into film. So she's working for an exec in the television division. But as she was going through film school, some of her professors were reading the series, and I was getting feedback. Mm-hmm. And there is a death of a major character at the end of the second book, and I tried really hard to foreshadow it, but I was really braced for people's opinion. And she called and says, my boss at USC said, she loves the book, but she really hates the death bringing that person back. And I said, well, no, I can't. It's the catalyst for something else. But if you're not moved by the death, then it was meaningless. So yeah.
Yeah, I was sitting in on a panel at one point where it was military writers, so specifically folks with military experience that wrote, and one of their biggest complaints about a lot of storytelling is it always tends to have a flow, whereas real life doesn't really work like that. You don't, it's if it's not convenient to your story,
Right.
It doesn't matter. You're still under attack or whatever. It just happens. So that just kind of made me think of that. Whereas you're talking about how it drives the story and kind of general storytelling.
Yeah, I had to break my main character. I had to really break him, and so I had to do, and I had to break the uncle. So obviously neither one of those guys, but I had to. And when I started writing the series, I already knew that this was going to occur. But it took months to write that scene. One chapter, but it took months, and I was crying when I did it. It was like, but you know what? I can't cheat the margins, so you just. Yeah. But I got a good Kirkus review. They said, wow, she really went there. And I said, yeah, I really did. And Kirkus, which doesn't like anything, was actually really favorable about the way I approached it. So, my publisher called and said, we have the Kirkus review and we're scared to open it. And I said, well, then why are you calling me? And then she did. She says, oh, my God, they really liked it. And I said, okay, good. Yeah.
Good. All right. So we've got some more opinions on Star Wars versus Star Trek versus Stargate, and it looks like we have a three-way split on that.
Well, go to the next slide.
Okay.
Because I promised everybody, and I'm going to show you these things. I went to a con in Boston, BosCon.
Mm-hmm. That's where I am broadcasting from, actually.
Yeah, and let's see if you can put this in front of the.
Let me see if I can see it, but I'm gonna. No.
That's okay, because mine is slow. Okay. So everywhere I go, I ran into Judy Peterson and Dave Peterson, who have been Tamino's. Mm-hmm. And I had always been looking for someone I could commission to do some fun things based on the book. And Judy read the book. She bought them and read them and sent an email and said, look what I did. And so these go with me everywhere I go. And even when I was at Worldcon in Ireland, people were like, where do we get those? And I said, well, so I had her make some more. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give one away. So I have him, or I have, wait, let me see if I can get it. I'm going to reach over. He broke. I have an octopus.
Oh, wow.
And she does amazing things. And obviously the octopus comes into play in the second book. The creature comes into play in the first book, but in the first book, Ben only sees the shadow. And this was created by Patrick Aerosmith, who is the illustrator who wrote my publisher and says, when they're in hiding, there's this massive shadow that they run into, this beast. And what does the beast look like? And I said, well, what does he think based on what I'm doing with the book? Mm-hmm. And he came up with this as a profile. And it's so far beyond anything I would have thought of. And so we adopted it. And so I thought about having a puzzle that says, what is this creature? Because I actually do say what it is. Mm-hmm. But I thought, no, that's not quite as fun. So on this next slide would Safe Harbor. Because these are not cheap to make. So I'm going to make it a little hard.
Which slide is it? So I'm looking at the Hope Diamond right now.
Yes. Okay. So if you see, there is a scene in the second book where, because these kids are 13 and they have undeveloped prefrontal cortexes, they have decided they're going to help out with these teams, and they are going to go steal the Hope Diamond. And actually, it's a challenge. Carlos, who is the next door neighbor, really, really wants this old computer that his new mentor has. It looks like his dad's. Mm-hmm. And the guy says, I'll give it to you if you go get me that Hope Diamond. And he says, no, I'm 13. The mentor says, yeah. So they're going to go get the Hope Diamond. And here's what's fascinating about the Hope Diamond is it's blue, but when you hit it with an ultraviolet light, it glows a red-orange in the dark. And it's because it's blue instead of a white diamond because it has a boron content in it. And it's one of the few diamonds that glows orange, which is why this mentor really wants this thing.
I always wondered why they turn the lights out in there occasionally when you go into the Okay.
Yeah. And so under ultraviolet light, and then it retains the glow for a while. And so if you look at the slide, they have to get there. Mm-hmm. And the Museum of Natural History will post its GPS location on its webpage. So of course they don't go where they're supposed to right away, because where's the fun in that? Mm-hmm. So they end up in the Kashi Prefecture, which is just outside of Tajikistan. And then they end up on a rock off the coast of Argentina.
Seems a little out of the way.
It's a little out of the way. But, I'm doing something with the book. If you notice, it's the exact same number. All I'm doing is changing the plus and minus sign.
Oh.
Do you see that?
Got it.
So a lot of times when you see a GPS location, it'll say north or west or east or south. But in this case, if you make it purely a binary number, not a binary. If you make it purely a number, you change the plus or minus sign, you end up somewhere else in the world, because of the way we slice up the Earth into longitude and latitude. Yep. So here's the question. They could have gone one more place. I want to make it funny where, this poor girl who's a hacker is stayed behind so she can dial them, and she's dialing them wrong. Mm-hmm. Where's the fourth place?
Okay.
Chat and comments. Do not use the book. Do not use the book because there's a copy editing error in the book. It's chapter 25 called Stealing Hope. Okay. So in the book, I have the wrong location for the coast of Argentina. But it actually goes to that other place. So where is the fourth place? And these are all custom made. Literally, they're not mass produced. They're custom made. And Judy sent me some extra ones. I'll do some random drawing for whoever can figure out where that fourth place is.
We'll see if they can do it. It might take them a minute. I'm sure somebody's Google searching this right now. But go ahead.
And I would tell you, you can play with Google Maps. It'll tell you where it goes. But I've given you 3 of the 4 choices, so there is a 4th choice.
All right. Well, we'll let them work out this puzzle. We can go ahead and drive on, and we'll pick a winner at the end.
Sure. And if no one gets it before then I'll just look at, if no one gets it, then they can just tag ConFromHome on Twitter or Facebook, and I'll sort through those.
Okay. We have one guess, but we'll let some other folks chime in, and we'll see if they agree. So what are your current projects, Christine?
I am way behind on the 3rd book. Mm-hmm. So that's coming out at the end of the year. But we had family illness, and I was grieving, and the character in the book was grieving because of the mistake. And so the 3rd book came out very sad and emo, and I'm trying to get it back to someone just told me they thought it was Empire Strikes Back meets Little Rascals. And I was like, yeah, no, I think it's Spy Kids meets Black Panther, but we'll see. And then I am working on a fictionalized adventure based on the real life Sherpa, Atlas Sherpa, who lives in Utah now, who holds the world's records for climbs to the top of Mount Everest.
Like number of climbs?
He's been up 21, 22 times. He has never lost a climber ever in his career.
Wow.
I'm
surprised it's that low, actually, because they take them up there all the time, right?
Well, and he has summited twice in the same day. And he was supposed to summit that year when all of the climbers were dying, that in thin air is kind of based on. And his wife had a premonition and forced him to stay in the village. Okay. So he did not go up at that. But I have met him, and he is one of the nicest guys on the planet. So I'm working with him and his foundation and his business partners on kind of a children's adventure series based on the life of a Sherpa child.
Okay. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, we had a half-hour pin for you, so we've got about 5 minutes left before our transition.
Well, I'll show you the next slide real quick,
Okay.
and I'll explain why that's there.
Okay.
This is, part of what I'm trying to do is point clues. So if you're reading tribes, and half of my audience right now is adults who claim that they don't want to admit they're reading the book but are having a good time with it. And so I'm pointing breadcrumbs. So with the next slide, what I was doing is, obviously the second book goes underwater. And so the first thing they meet are bloody belly coom jellyfish that when they are moving, their tentacles remind me of the dreads on a Rastafarian.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second picture is, I can never get the name straight, so I'm not going to say what it is. It's in the book. It's like osteolitis, but it looks like seaweed, but it's a species of octopi that when it's scared, it puts all its tentacles in the air and then runs on 2 tentacles. And there is, my editor said, what is this? And there's actually a 30-second video from the scientist at UC Berkeley who discovered them, showing it running. Mm-hmm. And then the third picture is a giant squid, which is obviously the ruler of Atlantis in my series. So, but I have Bermuda Triangle on the other side of the page because it's where, people have, there's all kinds of legends about why ships disappear there, mm-hmm. but there is a counterpart off the coast of Japan, mm-hmm. Which has similar magnetic properties in terms of where your compass points. And so those are the 2 locations for Atlantis. There's an Atlantis 1 and an Atlantis 2 are hidden in those 2 locations.
Now, does that correspond with the other GPS coordinates as well, much in the same way the other one did?
Yeah, I always try to get really close to what is the location of this thing. So a lot of times when they're moving around the world, I'm posting the GPS location at the top of the page.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. So we've got a couple minutes left. Did you want to leave the folks with any last thoughts? We'll capture guesses on the 4th location, and we'll get back to you on who the winner was in the chat. We've got 2 guesses right now.
Okay.
And we'll figure it out. So maybe you could give us the answer.
Indian Ocean.
Yep. Okay. One person got it right. One person got it wrong. It was Indian Ocean.
Indian Ocean. Yeah. The only thing that I had left was I had done plus, minus, 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 plus, plus. And so it needed to be a minus plus, a minus mm-hmm. 38.8 and a plus 77. And you end up in the Indian Ocean. Mm-hmm. But there is a copy editing error in the book, which puts them in Argentina when they're really, because they changed one of the plus and minus signs. And then, I want to give if you move the slide up, I'll give a shout out to Judy Peterson. Mm-hmm. Because I wanted to talk about dealers. It is really hard when you do cons, and I know money is tight for people, but I wanted to give her a shout out because, she did this on her own. And, but here's what I want to leave people with. I wanted to be a writer, and everybody said, no, you can't do that. And it took me 3 years before my first book was published, and it's in children's publishing or children's education. I have about 80 books commercially published now with major publishers. And so what I tell people is it's a Galaxy Quest quote: never give up, never surrender. If you don't try, it's a no. If you do try, it's a maybe. And so I have a kid who graduated from USC Film School, which takes only 4%. And we don't have those Hollywood connections, and we don't have their money. But I said, what's the worst that can happen? They say no, then you're in the same boat that you're in. But do something that you feel passionate about. I'm a trained civil engineer with an art background, this is what I wanted to do since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody had other ideas about what I should be doing with my time. And once I switched to writing, I think my youngest daughter, who's 24 now, was 3. What I modeled for them was, what are you passionate about? Make that your focus, make that your job. And then if you have to do a side hustle, long as it's not Hooters, or it's not illegal, I'm okay with that. But find that thing you're passionate about, because we don't know how long we have.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could have only written one series, Tribes is that series. So thanks for everybody who came to watch. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for coming. And it's the panelists that made this convention, possible. Can you send us, we'll repost information. I think it was Judy was the artist's name.
Oh, Judy Peterson at Fantaminal. So yes, I'll send you the information to her website. Mm-hmm. And then also, if you can tell me the person who got it right, if they email me, and I'll give you my real email address, which is Kansas City Mom. It's easier. I see that one more often. So it's all spelled out, Kansas City Mom at earthlink.net. Yes, Earthlink is still around.
I haven't heard an Earthlink
Send me your
domain in a while.
Send me the, it's easier than doing it through my website, but they can also do it through my website. I will box this up. It will be properly sanitized.
Yes.
And I will send it with one of Judy's cards, but I'm just really, people have wanted one, and I asked her to make me a couple of extras. And then on April 1st, follow me on either Twitter or, Instagram or Facebook, because starting April 1st, I'm going to post a challenge or a puzzle every day. And I have an iPad that my husband allowed me. I shouldn't say allowed, but he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I bought an iPad to give away as a prize." So,
wow.
I'm going to post. It's gold, because I like gold. It's never been out of the box. It's completely packaged, so it's sanitized. 128 gigs, and I'm going to give it away at the end of April. But I'm going to post challenges, I think, every day to keep myself honest. And then I'll have many prizes along the way, but everybody that enters, I'll do some random drawing. I'll figure it out in the next couple of days for the iPad.
Good to know. I'll be following that myself. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.